Life a good story, don't we? I mean, it's the reason why late at night you're laying in bed and you're propping open your bloodshot eye, just trying to finish that final chapter in that book you fell in love with. It's the reason why you go to the movies and you spend $12.15 on a stale bucket of popcorn and out-of-date butter just so you can watch that movie that all the hype is about. I mean, it's the reason why you spend 2 days binge watching an entire Netflix series, all 7 seasons in 2 days. And don't look at me with your judgmental eyes like you haven't done that. We all love a good story. As much as we love a good story, we hate a bad one. We hate a bad one. Have you guys ever heard of the children's book, Teacher from the Black Lagoon? Okay, funny story. So, at the end of last school year, we sent some New Life Retmo peeps up to McCullough Elementary. McCullough is a school that we partnered with, kind of adopted to come in and serve. And so, we came up there as guest readers at the end of the school year. So, we basically spent the day going from classroom to classroom, reading to the kiddos. It was a blast. Just an absolute blast. So I get in there, and the principal has prepared these baggies of books for us to read to the kids. So I'm flipping through them, and I'm like, hey, do you have any recommendations? I don't have a kindergartner at home. Do you have any recommendations of what would be appropriate to read to the kindergartners? So she's kind of flipping through, and she pulls out this book. She said, oh, this book's great. The kids love this book. They're just going to love it. Okay. So I took it, and I put it in front of all the other ones, and strolling down the hallway, guys, I was super nervous. Super nervous. Like, I'm afraid I'm going to go up in there and those kids are going to eat me alive. Like, who's this weird, strange old guy that's coming in my classroom? So I roll up in the classroom, and I quickly learn this reality. I am the only person in the room that's nervous about this. I go up in there, and I am the most awesome person in the world. Like, I walk in, my celebrity status goes through the roof. Those guys, they're laughing at everything I say. They're just eating it up, asking all kinds of intrusive personal questions. And I don't care, because here's my mantra in life. If you have the guts to ask, I'll answer. And so they're asking all these questions, and I'm the best thing since juice in a box and string cheese. And I'm in there, and I'm asking them, like, hey, what are you guys doing with your summer? And some kid in the back raises his hand. He says, I'm going to eat and sleep a lot. It's a kid after my own heart. And I was like, yeah, buddy. I was thinking to myself, man, this is what Justin Bieber feels like. Just one day, like the fanfare. But I brought out the book, and I'm talking to him. And mind you, I've never read this book, okay? And I open up the pages, and I begin reading it. And oh, my word. I can't just read it to you. I have to show you illustrations. Okay, so to give you a little bit of background, here's what this book's about. It's about a child that is afraid of moving up a grade because he's scared of what the teacher's going to be. So he has a bad dream that his teacher is a monster or a crocodile-like looking creature, and that she does bad things to the kids. So check this out. Check out the first page, if you can see it up here. Okay, there's this one scene where she gets mad at one of the boys. She takes his head off and replaces the globe with his head. I'm looking at this going, what? Check out, it gets better. Check out the next one. All right, she gets mad at this other kid, eats him. The illustrator takes the time to draw his arms flailing out of her mouth. All right, this next one. She gets mad at this little girl, decides she's going to swallow her whole, fold her body in half, and you can see her shoes and her glasses flying off as she's being swallowed. The kids were like, ew, and I was like, yeah, ew. The author of this book needs to be on the 9 o'clock news, and the illustrator needs to be in prison. This is weird. I'm a full-grown adult. I'm going to have nightmares. Kids are looking at this. I was somehow able to recoup and make it through the day, a few minutes in the bathroom, fetal position, crying to myself, but I was able to muster through. Bad stories. So we hate the bad stories, but we love good stories, right? Story of redemption. Story where the good guy overtakes the bad guy. Story where there's hopelessness, but it turns into victory. Story where the overlooked becomes the hero. Story where the lonely finds the one true love. We love a great story, but you know who writes a great story better than any of us? God. God the Father writes the most amazing stories. And here's the cool thing. Our stories are fiction. We put them in books, we make movies out of them, people enjoy them, they move on. But when God creates a story, man, what a fantastic story writer and teller he is. When he makes a story, it's reality. It's our lives. And God the Father writing amazing stories is the reason behind New Life Republic's second core value, which we call stories. So last week we launched a new series, because when you launch a new church, you got to launch a new series. So we launched a new series called Press Start. Okay, the Mario theme, the whole idea here is we got the controller in our hands, and I'm a geek, so I got to go that way. And you press the start button, and let the games begin on New Life Republic. So we launched it by talking about our first core value, which is simply called well. And what well means specifically as a church, we commit to going to people and not expect them to come to us. We see this so beautifully illustrated by Jesus himself in John chapter 4, when Jesus takes the path least traveled because he has a divine appointment with the Samaritan woman. By the way, if you missed that message, very key and critical, especially if you're in this place and you're praying if this is the right church for your family. These series of 4 messages, we're going to cover our 3 core values and our mission. So if you want to know the heartbeat, what is the fuel of this church, very important that you catch all those. Put them on iTunes, on the website at nlrepublic.com. You can download our mobile app from the Android, Apple app stores and catch it and podcast it off there. By the way, sidebar note. If you are a person that is an interactive visual learner, I'm married to one, okay? If you like interacting and things like that, at the bottom on the home screen, take notes button. If you hit that, you can follow along with the message today, fill in the blanks, paragraphs, pictures, all that sort of stuff. You can fill it in, and if you log in, it will save all of it so you can go back and review it later. All right, so if you're the type of person that loves to interact with stuff, that's there for you. So today we're going to dive deeper into our core values. Today we're going to talk about core value number 2, which is simply called stories. And more specifically, here's what stories means. Stories means as a church, we commit to doing everything we can to tell the stories of individuals whose life has been transformed by the gospel. As a church, we commit to doing everything we can to tell the stories of individuals whose life has been transformed by the gospel. And there's 2 specific reasons why we do this. Reason number 1 is because when you tell your story and you tell about what God is doing in your life, it makes Jesus familiar where he's a stranger. So if you're talking to someone that doesn't know the character of God, doesn't know the power of Jesus, you share with them what God has done in your life, it makes Jesus familiar where he's a stranger. Second thing it does is this: it expands and ignites the faith of the saints. So for those of us who follow Jesus already, when we hear about other believers and what God's done in their life, it just sets us on fire and it just pumps us up and grows our faith. This whole concept of telling your stories was commanded by Jesus himself in Mark chapter 5. In Mark chapter 5, Jesus tells a young man who wants to follow Jesus where he's going. He says, "No, you're not going to follow me, but instead what I want you to do is I want you to go back to your hometown and tell your story." Now, this young man had an incredibly crazy story. This young man had some significant issues. Significant. This young man was tortured and possessed by demons. Now, we don't have time today to eat that can of beans. Like, the reality of the existence of demons who are fallen angels that serve the devil, and the existence and their ability to torture, possess people who don't follow Jesus, that is something that we don't have time, and it's not our focus. We will talk about that, but at this point, it's not our focus. Here's what I do want us to bring from this: the reality that we are in a very real spiritual war. Amen. Like, it's not a physical military war. It is a very real, unseen spiritual war. In Ephesians chapter 6, verse 12 says this, "For our struggle is not against flesh and blood." So it's not against Sally at work for gossiping. It's not Uncle Bill for ruining the family party. It's not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the powers of this dark world, and against spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms. The Message puts it like this: this is for keeps. A life or death fight to the finish against the devil and all his angels, demons. 1 Peter 5:8 says, "Be alert and of sober mind. Your enemy, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion looking for someone to devour." Make no mistake about it, we are in a very real, unseen spiritual war. And make no mistake about it, the devil is your enemy. There is nobody that spends more time plotting your demise than him. There is nobody that laughs at you and roots for your failure than him. And the reality about this war is there are two sides. There's the devil's side and there's God's side. There's only two sides. And you're going to have to pick one or the other. And so, even if you're a person that says, you know what, I haven't picked yet, I haven't decided, well, you've already picked. Because when we were born, for all of sin fallen short of the glory of God, Romans 3:23, we have all started out on the devil's side by our inherently sinful nature. We have to willfully make a decision to put our faith in Jesus to transfer over to the other side of the battle. And if you're in this room and you're a follower of Jesus and you've put your life into his hands and you have transferred to that side of the battle, here's the other stark reality. The devil considers you a traitor and he's coming after you. Amen. But have no fear, because you are on the side of God who has already won the war. Amen. God sent Jesus to the cross. Jesus died. If that would have been the end of it, end of the story. But he rose again in 3 days, defeating death, hell, and the grave, which means that the war is over. God's already won while the battle still ensues for the souls of mankind. And because that battle still ensues, the reality is the devil does sometimes win some small battles. And he was winning, up until this point, winning the battle with this young man. So let's check out what it is. Mark chapter 5, verse number 1. So they arrived at the other side of the lake in the region of the Gerasenes. Now this is just a non-Jewish region of the Holy Lands. Verse 2, when Jesus climbed out of the boat, a man possessed by an evil spirit came out from the tombs to meet him. This man lived in the burial caves, the graveyard, and could no longer be restrained even with a chain. So he's a very violent individual and had a lot of power. Whenever he was put in the chains and shackles, as he often was, he snapped the chains from his wrists and smashed the shackles. No one was strong enough to subdue him. Day and night he wandered among the burial caves and in the hills, howling and cutting himself with sharp stones. What we're dealing with here is we're dealing with a naked homeless guy that lives where they place dead animals and people. I mean, we're not talking about a graveyard where they put the bodies 6 feet under. Like, they just throw him out there, and he's living next to the dead bodies and the bones of animals and things like. He lays on this carpet of filth and feces and vermin. He's exposed to wild animals all the time. And not only is he exposed to wild animals, but he acts like a wild animal. He acts like a monster, going around scaring the kids, howling. Not only that, but he looks like a monster. It says that he's cutting himself with sharp stones, probably trying to get out of this containment of his body. He's so tortured. So he's covered in these bleeding lacerations, and I'm sure a bunch of scar tissue from doing that. The enemy has effectively taken a normal human being, what once was a normal human being, and turned him into a monster. And we would be naive to not realize the truth that he's trying to do the same thing with all of us. Amen. That he has the same agenda, he has the same goal. It's not always so overtly, it's not always so violent, it's not so extreme, but it's subtle. the captivity, and it's almost more dangerous because it's subtle, because we don't realize it's so dangerous. But he is trying to bring out the monster inside of all of us, the sinful nature that was inherently there. Verse 6, when Jesus was still some distance away, the man saw him, ran to meet him, and bowed low before him. With a shriek, he screamed, "Why are you interfering with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God?" Interesting, one of the very first people in this gospel to identify Jesus as the Most High God is a devil. "In the name of God, I beg you, don't torture me." For Jesus had already said to the spirit, "Come out of this man, you evil spirit." Then Jesus demanded, "What is your name? Identify yourself." And he replied, "My name is Legion, because there are many of us inside this man." A Roman legion was a fleet of 6,000 army people that was very well organized and had strong military strength. Then the evil spirits begged him again and again not to send them to some distant place. We know from this telling of story in Gospel of Luke that they were asking specifically not to be sent to the abyss. There happened to be a large herd of pigs feeding on the hillside nearby. "Send us into those pigs," the spirits begged. "Let us enter them." So Jesus gave them permission. The evil spirits came out of the man and entered the pigs, and the entire herd of about 2,000 pigs plunged down into the steep hillside into the lake and drowned in the water. And all of us in this room that are bacon lovers died a little bit on the inside. That's a lot of grade A, delicious, crispy bacon. Just gone in an instant. Terrible tragedy. In that day, a herd of 2,000 pigs was a very lucrative business. I mean, we're talking Shark Tank, like Mr. Wonderful probably owned those pigs. Very lucrative. One commentator put it like this: it was like Jesus rolled up to a new car lot and he drove a 2,000 Cadillac Escalades off of the cliff. That's the financial comparison of what's happening here. Verse 14, the herdsmen, these are the guys that took care of the pigs, fled to the nearby town and the surrounding countryside, spreading the news as they ran. People rushed out to see what had happened. Can you imagine this scene with me? Okay, the herdsmen are running through the town. They're just running through the alleys and they're running through the streets. Save the bacon! Save the bacon! And they're like hollering and running, and people are going crazy. Schools are shutting down. The diners are shutting their doors, flipping the open sign to close. People are running outside their house with their Garth Brooks PJs still on, running down the street, going crazy. It's like a scene from Walking Dead. Zombies are coming out, and everyone's going crazy. The pigs. People are rushing to the grocery store and buying all the milk and bread and the water, and the disciples are still there from last week. And so they're going through this, and it's crazy. It's apocalyptic. I mean, the 2,000, the herd, all of them in the water? And the crazy guy? The monster? You're telling me he's clothed and in his right mind? No, I got to see this. Verse 15, a crowd gathered around Jesus, and they saw the man who had been possessed by the legion of demons. He was sitting there fully clothed and perfectly sane. And they were all afraid. Verse 16, then those that had seen what happened told the others about the demon-possessed man and the pigs. We call these guys narcs. Let me tell you, I got the inside story. Verse 17, and the crowd began pleading with Jesus, would you please stay? Would you please come back to my home? I got people that are sick. I got people who really need your power. Well, and by the way, obviously what you did, we tried to chain and shackle that guy, and he just kept breaking them. You walk in, and you just tell the demons what to do, and they all left into the pigs. So would you please come back home? We have some people that we would like you to talk to. We need some of that. And by the way, obviously you're from God, so we want to worship you. No. And the crowd began pleading with Jesus, go away. Leave him alone. Leave him alone. You know what they're scared of? Their pigs are next. They're scared that their pigs are next. They may not have had 2,000 pigs on the hillside, but they got 5 or 6 at home. good income generators, and they're afraid that if Jesus walks up to their property, walks up to their crib, that he'd walk in and chase their pigs away too. They're not concerned with this young man who just got set free. They're not concerned with this man who was howling and growling in the caves and scaring the kids. They weren't concerned about that. They weren't concerned about the fact he was sitting there clothed and in his right mind. All they cared about was Jesus was going to come chase their pigs away too. These people, these Gerasenes, they preferred pigs over people. So do we. Their response was, I'm not willing to give up any more pigs to see lives changed. Far too many people turn their backs on Christ because they're afraid if they invite him in that he will completely disrupt everything. That he will come in and that he will demand more of you than you ever wanted to give, that he will rearrange your priorities, that he will ask you to lay down everything. You know what? It's a good reason why they're afraid of that, because it's true. It's true. Jesus will invade your space. He will invade your space. He will come in, he will ask more out of you than you ever wanted to give. He'll ask you to go places you never wanted to go. He will mess things up. And why? And it makes sense that he would, because before Jesus, your life was built on the systems of this world. Before Jesus, your priorities aligned around the most important person in your life, you. Jesus is coming in and saying, hold on, guys, we got to recalibrate because now I'm number one, which means now you have to establish your systems based on the kingdom of God, which is backwards from the world, and you have to make me number one, which means your priorities have to surround me, not you. But this is absolutely necessary and a critical ingredient to allowing God to change our stories. He's a gentleman. He's not going to force his way in. If you want a story of redemption, if you want a story where the good guy overcomes the bad guy, if you want a story where the overlooked becomes the hero, lay your life down before the feet of Jesus. Amen. Submit your priorities. Submit your plans. Submit your will. Submit your time. Lay it all down. The more you lay down, the more he changes. And he just makes you a different person. More like the image of him. Absolutely necessary for God to change your life that you lay down your life. Many people will turn their backs on Jesus and say, no, get away from here. His response to that is terrifying. Verse 21, Jesus got in the boat. He's not going to force himself on you. He's not going to say, Josh, I want to write a story of redemption whether you like it or not. We have to allow him to come in. We have to give him the permission to change our hearts. And if we don't, he's just going to get in the boat and he's going to go to the other side of the lake where there's a group of people waiting to talk to him. Terrifying. That's the Savior of the world. That's the Son of the living God. That's your key to eternity. Just leaving. Just like that. Now, as long as you're still breathing, call him up. He'll come back. It's not over. But when we send Jesus away, how tragic is that? Verse 18. As Jesus was getting into the boat, the man who had been demon-possessed begged to go with him. Obviously, okay? He doesn't want to go back to his hometown, show his face. Okay, they saw him at his worst. You know what I'm talking about? You don't want to go back to your hometown if they saw you at your worst. You don't want to go back there. So obviously, he's like, no, those guys, they know what I did. They know how ugly I was. They know how the things that I did and the things that I said. They know. They saw me naked. Like, I don't want to go back to those people. I want to go with Jesus because Jesus came in. He set me free. He gave me a new lease on life. I want to go with him. And Jesus' response is awesome. Verse 19. But Jesus said, no. Go home. Tell your family and tell them everything the Lord has done for you and how merciful he has been. Jesus is saying, you have a more powerful purpose than just following me on this boat and tagging along and becoming some sort of 13th disciple. You have a more powerful purpose. That purpose is for you to stroll in to that area, to your hometown, those people that know you. Walk in there, show them that you're a changed man. They're going to know. That's the guy that we tried to chain and shackle down and couldn't. That's the crazy guy. And you walk in and you tell them who did this. You tell them about how Jesus set you free and that he will do the same thing for you. You tell your story. You tell them about how you were broken and now you're healed. You tell them about how you were lost and now you're found. You tell them about how you were overcome by evil and now Jesus has made you to overcome. You walk in there and you blow their minds with the power of God and what he's done for your life. That's your purpose. That's exactly what I want you to do. And can you imagine this guy walking in and his conversations and how they would go? Like he's walking in. It's like, hey, aren't you the guy that used to run around naked and scream at everybody and scare all the kids? Well, I prefer Stan, but yeah, that would be me. No. That can't be you. That can't be you. This guy's nuts. Like this guy was breaking chains and shackles and all this other stuff. That can't be you. You had a Britney Spears tattoo right here. Like that can't be you. Guys, no, look, really. Like it is me. It's me. So what are you saying? You're some kind of preacher now? Yeah. You're walking around our town proclaiming about Jesus being the Messiah and the power of God. You're some sort of preacher? Yeah, that's my story. God turned me from a monster to a preacher like that. That's the power that he has. You see, what the guy didn't realize when Jesus told him to go back to his town was that those people in that town needed Jesus just as much as he did. They were in captivity subtly. And even though they weren't overt and violent like he was, they needed Christ. And his story was going to point them to Jesus and say, he did it for me, he can do it for you. Amen. I know this story of these three men, these three fathers. And there's a grandfather and a father and a grandson. And the grandfather hated everyone, lived a very secluded life, and lived on this little plot of land with a house that looked like much like a mower shed, but it was falling down. The roof was literally falling down, caving in. No electricity, no air, no heat. He chose to live this way. Lived like a hermit. And any bit of money that he had, it wasn't because he didn't have money, because he got benefits and things like that. He could have afforded a nice, decent little apartment. Any money that he had, he stuffed inside Folgers coffee cans. So it's about time that something of value went inside Folgers coffee cans. But he put the money in the Folgers coffee cans, and he took it and he literally, with a shovel, dug holes, put the coffee can, and buried it because he didn't trust money, he didn't trust people. He never took a bath, no running water, never took a bath, never cared to. His only pastime was a CB radio, and his call name was Hitler. And it wasn't ha-ha. I don't know if you could make that ha-ha, but it wasn't, he meant it. He hated everyone, but especially the people that didn't look like him. He had a few choice names that he used to direct their path on a frequent basis. One of the only human interactions that he had was with his son and his grandsons, who would come pick him up weekly to take him to the grocery store to get his non-perishables. The only ounce of love that he really ever shown was he would buy those grandsons a quart of ice cream that comes in those Highland boxes things every now and again. He passed on. There wasn't a lot of people there, and there wasn't a lot of people that cared, not a lot of people that cried. His son, the father in this story, vowed to his kids, I will never end up like that. I will do everything in my possible. We have a long line of dirty family name stuff, and I refuse. I will do everything in my power to make sure that you guys have a better future. Blue-collar factory worker, worked his fingers to the bone to make sure that was possible for his two kids. His two kids grew up, have great careers, loving families. One of the sons, in particular, the grandson, Jesus grabbed a hold of his heart when he was a teenager, drastically changed him even more. Through him, the entire family got saved, including the dad. Jesus called him into ministry, and then he became a preacher, and a week ago, he launched a church in Republic. It's me. Last week, I called my dad, and I was like, hey, thank you for coming out for the launch service. They drove in from Kansas, and I was like, man, it's so cool to see you guys. Thank you. He was like, let me tell you something, son. Like, he shared a perspective from me that I never would have, a vantage point I would never had. He said, man, knowing the person your grandfather was and seeing what God's doing in your life, it's a miracle how much he's changed our family in 2 generations. And he was like, it's awesome. And I said, Dad, that's because you broke the chain. Like, you fought for a different story. You prayed for a different story. And God honored that. God honored that. God is the best storyteller. He's the best story writer, and he will rewrite your story if you allow him to. And then he'll tell you, no, go tell it. Revelation 19:10. For the testimony of Jesus is the spirit of prophecy. The very DNA of our story is found in this verse. There's a story of Jesus as a spirit of prophecy. What does that mean? What does that mean? It means what he's done before, he'll do again. He will do it again. He is ready, willing, able, and just waiting for you to give him the permission to invade your life and change your story. A story from brokenness to healed. A story from being lost to found. A story from being addicted to being clean. He's just waiting. And because he did it before, he will do it again. You telling your story is just the spark to the flame. It's just the beginning part of the process. You telling your story points people to God and say, if he done it for me, he'll do it for you. And if he done it for me, he'll do it for me again. So my question for you tonight is this. Who's writing your story? Somebody is. Remember, there's 2 sides of the war. Either the enemy is or God is. Who are you allowing to write your story? Because I'm telling you, just like God writes a story, the enemy likes to write a story too. And he's crafting one where the bad guy wins in the end. Who are you letting write your story? Because Jesus wants to be the author of what your story is, so that he gets glorified and people are drawn to him. Would you bow your heads with me tonight?